This week on Great Chat, we talk about the potential ripple effects of very online, attention-seeking founders. I'm Helen, and this week we're joined by Ashley and Sally. But first, a quick shout out to our sponsor, Mercury. Mercury is the fintech used by over 200,000 companies to simplify their finances. We're huge fans at Great Chat, and we use it to run this podcast. Additionally, a few of us are also current customers for our funds and startups, not to mention the dozens of startups we've backed as VCs, angels, and scouts that run their businesses on Mercury. Something I love about Mercury is how straightforward the onboarding flow was. Using it is a delight, and I'm excited to see them reach more startups and small businesses who will listen to this podcast. If you're launching a startup or fund, visit mercury.com to apply online in 10 minutes or less. Quick note, Mercury is a financial technology company, not a bank. For more details, check out our show notes.
Hi, ladies.
Hi.
Hello.
Happy birthday, America.
Yeah, what were you all doing?
If we're in the Bay Area, we like to recreate our childhood 4th of July. So,
What?
yeah, our favorite town to spend 4th of July is Davis, California.
I don't even know where
Small,
that is.
adorable town. Yeah, on UC Davis. But it's a college town. So you get kind of like this small town America feel and like a ridiculously amazing fireworks display at a community park. But it's like, you don't get all the MAGA vibes that come with it. That's some of the small town stuff in California. We had a great time. Where were you?
I love that. I kept it local. I stayed in San Francisco, and I was just thinking, I think it's the first time I've been in the Bay Area for 4th of July. It was quite nice. We had a quaint little get-together with friends. A lot of, I think, friends you know. Yeah, it was great.
Did you see fireworks? It's always like so foggy this time of year.
No, there were some good fireworks, but I actually went home before the fireworks were done. So I experienced it on Twitter, as one does.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I fled the city and went up to the Catskills for the weekend and got some nature in, which I'm realizing it's actually like a very necessary part of living in New York City. Like you have to leave and reset your nervous system sometimes. And so yeah, it was beautiful. Lots of hikes. I tried to stay offline as much as possible. So I didn't even realize that Elon Musk had announced a new political party, the American Party.
That's right.
Exciting. We are now a 3-party system, guys. We've been waiting for this moment.
Oh my gosh. Wait, so who joined on, or who has been vocally, who raised their hand immediately and said, I'm in? Is it
All
Andrew
I saw
Yang?
was that, yeah, I think Elon reached out to Andrew Yang. So the Silicon Valleys reunite.
I feel like we've seen a flavor of this our entire lives, where there's some third party who says, I am fiscally conservative and socially liberal, and there needs to be another option, right? Or it's like a lot of, I think, California conservatives. I remember hearing that phrase when I first moved to the state, and I was like, what does that mean? Basically that. And so I don't know, why will this one be different?
Well, apparently the Libertarian Party has been trying to get on Elon's radar because they already have some of that baseline infrastructure built. And apparently it's very hard to even get on a ballot. There's just a lot of admin work that needs to be done.
Classic.
The Doge has not yet fixed. And so that's one route. But I don't know. I just feel like there are so many people who are disenchanted with both extremes. Obviously, it's a huge long shot that this would be the moment that a real third party emerges. And I'm very skeptical that Elon would be the one to lead that charge in a mainstream popular way. But I feel like the openness might be there. I mean, I think there are a lot of Republicans who are upset about the bill that just passed and some of the implications, especially on national debt. Obviously, a lot of Democrats aren't happy with the Democratic Party. So
yeah, but I think that Elon, if he had done this exact thing a year ago, I actually think it could have been a lot more successful. I think that he got put.
Sure.
Yeah. He was sort of pushed
this is
to
him
the main
saving
stage
face right now.
Yeah,
he's just kidding. Look over here.
Right. Well, I mean, ironically, from a marketing perspective, the only thing I saw was I tried left, I tried right, and now I'm gonna. There's something like that. I tried, him referencing back to his, I used to be a donor to the Democrats, and then, obviously he was part of the Trump administration, and, this is what's left. I actually thought that message might resonate quite a bit.
I think this is you look at just broader, if you take a step back, it's just the political system has just totally been broken. So I used to consider myself certainly more of a Democrat, and I think where I stand now is a little bit more down the middle, and I think a lot of people kind of resonate with that. But we've seen this many years ago with Ralph Nader, I think was the latest of the attempt with a third party, and with Elon potentially running, this will only split up the party system on the right. So I think
Elon can't run himself, so
that's true.
That is off the table. He was born in the wrong country,
right?
So I think we're safe there.
But I think the mechanics of it is a lot more complicated versus where we are as a country and what we need. So how do we fix that? I don't know, but
definitely not what this podcast is about. Absolutely not. I flipped through this deck that I think Malia Russell posted on LinkedIn, and accompanied an article that basically it was a commentary on the current state of the startup job market. And I feel like we've talked about this a couple of times, where it seems like there's this bifurcation of the haves and have-nots. If you are chasing the headlines of, all of these insane comp packages of AI researchers joining, OpenAI or Meta, you might think that it's a really frothy job market. But really, it's those are, it's very much that piece of the market. And for everyone else, it actually, there's a much different story.
Yeah, it's so funny. Helen, I actually had coffee with Malia this morning, so got to chat about that with her in real time. I think it's very true that there is an all-out brawl for top talent. I mean, we've seen that at the highest levels, as we've discussed in prior episodes, with the crazy $10 million, $100 million comp packages to top AI researchers. But, it's also happening in other functions for people who have real prestige, real expertise. I think what's harder, based on the data source, which is PAVE, it's very much focused on growth stage startups, right? Who are kind of competing maybe sort of at the edges of that same talent pool. And the reality is early stage startups aren't even in the same playing field.
Totally.
And they're also just not hiring as much. And so I think there's this invisible layer of the job market for people who have the risk appetite and the networks to join early stage startups. And I was catching up with one of the founders of a company in my angel portfolio the other week, and it's a company that's doing really well. And the founder was like, "Oh yeah, it's the early 20-something AI native employees I'm hiring across sectors that are just doing incredible things with AI and completely changing how we operate." And so I think there is a counter narrative that's a little harder to see right now. But when you're an early stage startup, you can't afford to pay for top talent. You can't buy A players. You have to make A players. And
100%. But not only that, in the late 2010s, where DEI was sort of in its prime, I think the thing that I would talk to founders about was if you can't compete with the $1 million comp packages of a lot. Because even then it was pre-AI, right?
million sounds so quaint, Helen.
Wow. Exactly. Meta, Google. But these were new grads. They were competing for new grad talent. And the way that you compete against them, wasn't going to be through comp or benefits. It was going to be through the mission. So I think you saw a lot of founders at the time really leaning into, whether it was DEI or whether it was something else, but it's the idea of being a mission-driven company is probably the best weapon you have to really attract really top talent when you can't compete on comp.
And also, Ashley, to your point about just burning through cash and earlier startups, I think one of the slides that I was flipping through said companies are burning through a lot more equity. And the earlier stage companies, especially when they're trying to compete with the talent that's trying to go to Meta or OpenAI, are burning through equity. And that's going to be, they're going to wake up in the Series A, Series B, realizing how much they're going to be diluted or how much they've given away because, they can't afford the salary of these AI scientists. So they're oh, I'll give away X amount of equity. That's a lot more than they would traditionally, even in the era of a decade ago that Helen was talking about.
Yeah, 100%.
I will say the other thing just on the general job market today. I talked to a lot of friends who work in BD and partnerships. That's kind of the route that I post media world took on. And I have so many talented people that work at, high profile, BD or partnerships role that are trying to get into the AI roles. And I think one of the things, again, that the deck talked about was now because with AI, one person can do a lot more jobs. And so they're hiring fewer people that can do a wider variety of things. And that's actually hurting a lot of the senior people that are really talented because, they've managed teams. And again, maybe that's not the right profile for the earliest of stages, but these like mid-stage companies that are looking for the hungry person, let's say, maybe marketing is a good example too, where...
Oh, it's a great example. All the time I get asked like, how do I, optimize SEO for this specific, landing page? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm out of the game, right? Like, I mean, I can call 3 people and sort of figure that out, or I know the right people to call, but yes, exactly. And so I think that with AI, the expectations of senior folks are increasing. So like with the big comp packages and it being like sort of a talent war, I think expectations have also risen. And I think maybe that's a good thing. Like, I think when you're, part of a big tech company or a late stage company and you've got a big team and sort of your skill that you're honing becomes management, maybe it's a good thing that you get back into your like real trade.
Get uncomfortable.
Growth is uncomfortable. They don't tell you that. I also think that the crafts themselves are changing, right? Like marketing today looks different than marketing 10 years ago. I mean, we'll probably get into this more later, but like comms today looks very different than it did 10 years ago. And so either if you're a senior person, you've been able to like evolve and keep your skill set fresh, or you're going to be displaced by younger people who are coming in and figuring this stuff out with like fresh eyes, and they're not burdened by the old way of doing things. So, I mean, it's so funny because this tension has always existed in startups, right? Like, I remember being a 24-year-old employee at Box, and then we'd like hire an exec from Salesforce, and they'd want to do all the stuff the Salesforce way, and we had our little Box way of doing it that we'd figured it out ourselves. And, there's sort of this like cultural tension or friction, which can be a really good thing if you have like the right environment to sort of like grapple with it and figure out the best path forward. But there's always been sort of this like, the wisdom of people who've done it before, and then sort of the creative ignorance of people who are doing it for the first time. And it just feels like all of these things that we're seeing happening now are things that have happened before, but they're just happening at such a crazy speed and such a crazy scale because the AI platform shift is moving so quickly, and the amount of money is going into this category is so massive, and then the biggest companies are so big. So it's just like fun to watch this all play out on hyperspeed.
Totally. The most interesting thing that I saw, which I think we've talked about in a sense, was just that it really does seem like there's sort of a drought of entry-level roles. And I think that in the past, I mean, even before like the AI craze, like we talked, like what roles do we think will be replaced by AI in the future? And everyone guessed that it would be more like, entry-level type roles or administrative roles, but we're actually seeing it happening, now. Like if you look at any, even well-funded AI company website, like it's very hard to find anything that's, more junior than like pretty much like a mid-level management role. On the non-technical side at least. So
it's almost like we need a new, do you guys remember, I'm really going to date myself here, but Google's APM program?
Oh yeah, like, and the APMM program too. Yeah, yeah.
Associate Product Marketing Manager, I think. And they just like hired, Google early on was all about like top engineering talent. But at some point they got greedy and they're like, let's just hire all the other smart people too.
We did this at Dropbox too. It was the Dropbox rotation program, DRPs. And I think it was like 3 or 4 years.
But like, I think Google really was the genesis of this, where they were like, we're hiring for IQ. We're like pulling smart people out of Harvard and Stanford en masse, and we're just going to train them up. And it was a great sort of on-ramp for really smart young people to get into tech. And it doesn't feel like that exists today. And I can't think of a good corollary for that, but maybe
like at scale, because those programs were pretty big. The one that Google,
totally. Yeah, everyone has.
I can think of like True Ventures has like a fellowship program that's like that. But I know some others too, but Google's was truly like meaningful and.
Yeah, and they kind of made everyone else want to focus on, should we just be hiring really smart people and training them up internally? So, you gotta like build your programs to make your A players. in-house.
All right. Well, this week, maybe there was a little bit of a summer slowdown after last week saying that there was no summer slowdown, because I feel like it was kind of quiet. And when I say quiet, it doesn't mean that there wasn't news. There's plenty of news, but last week, was the Soham Parak working at 15 different AI companies sort of news. And so I didn't really see anything. And that made me think, whether we've calibrated our expectations of, what founders and VCs too, what they should be like and how they should carry themselves in public, because I felt like something was missing last week. And so started thinking about like the downstream effects of that. And I think that we've talked about this a couple of times in the group chat, but like, if you are a potential founder today and you're on Twitter and you're reading headlines about, you're following kind of Andreessen Horowitz invested in Kluwi, right? There's actually things that come from that sort of behavior. It wasn't something that I think started that way. We didn't know where it was going, but you could think of that as being rewarded in some way or it being successful for the company. But if you're a founder and you look at that and you're like, I don't think that I have it in me to do what that founder is doing. What does that mean? Does that founder, do they get discouraged? Or an emerging manager, for example, like just from my own journey in 2021, when I was thinking about raising a fund, I saw other emerging fund managers at the time. There were fewer of them, and there were definitely fewer solo women. But the ones that were very vocal on Twitter. And I was like, I don't know if I have what it takes to do that. And so, I found a partner, so I just kind of curious, what does this look like 10 years down the line if people are deciding to opt out because we've sent them the message that unless you're super public and build a public persona, and Sally, a couple of weeks ago, you said that too, founders, it's now table stakes to be able to do this. What does that look like down the line was sort of the curiosity.
I know. I said that a few weeks ago. I think I've changed my mind on it. I think the level of fake signal has gone way too extreme. I will say on the Kluwi example, though, I was listening to Brian Kim's podcast, and he let the round for Andreessen, and he was like, look, he got on my radar before the whole Columbia admissions thing. He went and visited him at the Kluwi house, and there were all these senior people that were hanging out and working around. So there is the his brain and quality of his way of attracting talent. And then I think his product, as it's starting to emerge a little bit more, is more of a consumer facing product. And so I think there are certain products that work for being loud and being and at the end of the day you have to have a good product in order to sustain that growth, but it's become a great marketing engine for them. But I don't think it works for everybody. So I actually think depending on who you are, what you're building, not everyone should be building in public and being all loud and being on social media. That part I take back.
No, so I think that's a great point on consumer, it being maybe it is truly table stakes for certain sectors. And then the other thought I had was maybe it's a very boomer thought to have that you're spending all your time on social media. There are all these tools and there's AI, maybe you're scheduling the posts and you are actually spending, the majority of the working day on product development and things that are creating real enterprise value and not just, being a professional poster or being on TVPN. But maybe that's just what we see.
Yeah, I think, it's funny. I feel every day there's someone who slides into my DMs, which are, for better or worse, open, offering to tweet for me and get me more followers. And so who knows, maybe people have people behind the scenes doing this.
But they're asking you to tweet, or
it's always accounts with 2 followers pitching me on them tweeting for me. And I'm like, I think your pitch could be stronger. But no, I love it when I talk to founders who are just completely not on Twitter, and this world doesn't even exist for them. And it's fine. I don't have a bias for or against founders who are what we would call at least extremely online seeming, whether or not they are actually extremely online. It's funny, I started my career at Box, and Aaron Levy got very good at Twitter over time. And people thought he was tweeting all the time. And he actually wasn't. He would tweet occasionally, but his tweets did really well. And so there was this perception of oh my gosh, Aaron's just on Twitter constantly. And if you actually
his tweets are on point.
Yeah, he was really good at it. And so I think it's a couple of things. It's one, like, do you enjoy this? Is this something that gives you energy? It makes you feel more a part of the startup ecosystem. Being a founder is such a lonely job. Building a company is so hard. If this is part of the fun for you, then awesome, like lean into it. And then there's also the part of like, can this help your business? And I think in the Kluey sense, like we wouldn't be talking about them if they hadn't done their sort of like rage marketing, sexy like product, meet the team videos and all of that. And so I think the most important thing is just like play games that you can win, and don't see someone else doing, like if you are a Kluey competitor, you don't have to out Kluey. Like figure out what your own thing is. And, and ideally that's tied to your business and your customer and your go-to-market. So yeah, I think it can be very distracting for people who see this and feel a lot of pressure. It's kind of hilarious because I feel like people who see this feel a lot of pressure, like LinkedIn is booming because of that, right? People have this belief that they have to be constantly visible, constantly online. And I feel like I see that in my LinkedIn feed daily. It's like a work journal for a lot of people.
Oh my God, this morning, so a friend of mine, he sent me a video of him doing a news segment, and he's like, should I post this on LinkedIn? The interviewer cut me off, so I feel like I didn't quite, it doesn't seem like I answered her question. And my response was, I think people who love you will watch the video, but most people, including the people you want to impress, will probably look at the post and engage with it or mention it to you and not actually watch the video. So I would be really thoughtful about how you create that post. And, that answer just came so naturally to me. And he's like, oh yeah, good idea. And that's what he did. And it's like, it's crushing it. And I'm wondering how many people actually watch the video. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Like this is kind of the new normal. And, we don't really acknowledge it that much. But one thing that I was thinking about, and again, San Francisco resident, the criticism of the Zoran campaign or him as a candidate, like a couple of weeks before the election, one that I saw was that this is another like failed actor or a drama kid who's like, cosplaying being a politician. And that was kind of right around the time where we were talking about how all news is entertainment. We just want to be entertained. And I'm like, well, who created this system, right? Is it the social media platforms? Is it our decreasing attention spans and sort of like, needing to be entertained that then produces candidates like this or produces founders like, the ones that do entertain us on Twitter? Like how, I don't feel like this is not, it's not on an individual level. I feel like something that it's rightfully so that they must feel like this is what there is demand for. And so this is what we get.
Yeah. I also feel like there's very little value in like railing against it. And, I think there can be a bit of a, like, if you are not in the young generation that is setting the charge, setting the pace, like to want to critique. And I try to just like stay open-minded and just observe. Right. I mean, think about the Web3 frenzy of a few years ago, right? There was a whole lingo associated with that. We had new acronyms. People had NFT profiles. Like it was this like sudden cultural force. And granted, it was like a more niche group of founders, but it's kind of amazing to watch that happen. And I think, I think it's, there's a lot of gravitational pull to be part of a zeitgeist. And there can be a lot of like both benefits and drawbacks to being swept up in it. But yeah, Helen, I think you're absolutely right. Like I think our, attention spans have been rewired by social media and like the TikTokification of news. Political news was entertainment, starting with Trump. Now tech news is entertainment. I mean, think about the last pod. We talked about the Bezos wedding and Zuck snatching up OpenAI engineers. Like tech is the new, one of the new like entertainment centers. And I think we are all like participants in it. We're very culpable in this podcast. We're like seeing this happen and commenting on it. So yeah, definitely. If there is a need, people will rush in to fill it. Now how you parse that as an investor, deciding whether to back a founder who's like really leaning into, having that online presence that meets that entertainment need is like a different question entirely.
Right. So what if, because I think the vast majority of founders, and maybe that's just like my experience, but okay, so like Zuck, but remember like Zuck almost 20 years ago, or Adam D'Angelo or Drew Houston, like these are pretty introverted, technical folks who, if you were to put them, sort of in their early stages of building their companies into today's world, I don't know if they would have all gravitated towards like this very sort of conspicuous way of sharing what they're building. And so
but they had different things they gravitated towards, right? Like I was just thinking about this, like our sort of generation, it was like the perks wars, like who had the best offices, who had the best food menus, like I don't ever hear about the OpenAI office or how good the food was, but for Twitter and Google and, the Airbnb office where every conference room was an Airbnb, like there was like, that was like leaning into sort of the cultural moment. I actually feel like press coverage was a huge badge of honor, right? So they may have been introverts, but people cared about, early founders cared about having that like launch post from TechCrunch. Getting to sit on the stage at D and later Code was like a badge of honor. It was just like a different vector for sort of competing and showing up and I think primarily attracting talent as well as venture. I think this stuff is maybe a little bit less relevant for customers for most businesses. Maybe that's different if you sell to other startups, but I think it's like the same old game just being played on like a new arena.
Well, that's a good perspective. It's like we don't know what the outcomes are going to be, right? Like maybe we can talk about like what the outcomes have been, right, for the founders that I just named, who started like 20 years ago or so. But it's still like TBD or.
But I think actually to what you're describing, if like the era of like the Airbnb and Dropboxes of the world, their audience for promoting these like cafeterias were for the employees or future employees and attracting them. I feel like today
that's the same thing today. They want talent, they want venture dollars.
I think it's like customers is sort of where I'm getting
I think that the tweeting does very little for customers. Like I think for most companies, maybe like certain companies that are like selling to other startups, maybe.
Yes. I think the VC stack, I think it does great for that. Yes.
Yeah. But I think very little of this like Twitter performance is about actually acquiring customers for most companies.
Yeah. I just think that echo chamber and bubble is so concentrated. They're so online and they do have, like a very immediate access to capital that we sort of think of it as outsized, but it's not. It's quite small. And so you see this play out all the time when, I think like we joke that YC companies, now YC is so big that the TAM for just selling into other YC companies through Bookface is actually like reasonably large enough to get you a great seed round on that traction alone, right? And maybe even Series A. Well, so what if you are like an introverted builder or somebody who is in an operating role and you're just like, yikes, I got into, tech because I've always been interested in technology, or I was a STEM kid and, I didn't know that there would be this sort of like theatrical element to it or, performance art. And I don't really know how I feel about that. Like how, what would you say to them?
But I wonder if some of that is an early stage game versus a later stage game. If you look at, take Sam Altman out of the equation, you've got like Mira Maruti, Ilya Schwitzger, Fei Li building World Labs. None of, even like you go into like the 11 Labs of the world, these people aren't tweeting aggressively the same way that we're seeing the like Clues of the world that are a little bit more earlier stage. So maybe as like these companies mature, and I think the like duration of maturity is also truncated because these companies have been only around for 1 to 2 years, but still valued a lot more dollars. So there's various strategies that work across AI companies. I think a lot of it also has to do with like if you're a researcher, you need compute, and so you're going to gravitate towards the company that has a lot of capital. I think that was kind of the sell for Zuck. And Meta was like, hey, we have unlimited compute. You can do as much iteration and research at where we are versus when you're compute constrained at a smaller company. So come with us. So the leadership function at that level, I think, is there's two different strategies still that we are seeing. We just like to see, we like to talk about the loud ones because we're just, all of us are turbulently online, so it's just like in our face.
I mean, this is the beauty of like having a portfolio, is you actually can look and see, do the sort of public facing efforts have any correlation to business performance and revenue and growth and even hiring? And like, I don't know, I look at my portfolio and like the top performing companies by whether it's like markups or revenue, it's like a total mixed bag. Some of them are super introverts. You couldn't name them, even though their business is doing phenomenally. Others are more active. Maybe they're posting on LinkedIn. Maybe it's actually the company brand that's out there. And so that's like the fun thing. I think when you're just following along on Twitter, you have very little information to go on, and you tend to think like follower count might correlate with someone's importance or relevance in a space, and it actually like really doesn't most of the time. And so to the extent that that's comforting to know that there are people building really significant, really strong businesses without having to be extremely online. They might not even have a Twitter account. Maybe they post like, a funding announcement once a year on LinkedIn and then our heads down. I think that, we all have like comms, marketing, media backgrounds. Like at the end of the day, like know who your audience is, know what you want them to do, have a theory about how you're going to reach them. And that goes for whether it's customers, that goes for whether it's employees, it goes for investors. And like Twitter is not necessarily the fastest path to any of those. It's just like some people are really good at leveraging that for their company's growth, on different dimensions. And that's great, but it is by like far from the only path. And I will actually say, this is a little spicy. There are absolutely founders I've said no to quite quickly because of their online presence. And
like, do you think their attention is like, too distributed or why?
Maybe more of a liability
Yes.
based on what they're sort of putting out there. And maybe there's some assumptions about attention, although I think less that. Like I see what they're tweeting, and I think it's going to be harder for them to land the customers they want to land and hire the employees they want to hire. So that's my like spicier take. I think it can hurt you as much or more than it can help you. And so do it from a place of like authenticity and because you have things to say, not because you feel like you need to check that box.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, like you have to deliver, right? And, maybe even building quietly, especially in the beginning, like gives you a little bit more space to sort of figure it out. I mean, I do think that it was a very COVID era thing, this whole build in public, raise in public, all of these things. And I think some have continued on, but I think for the most part, like I think things kind of went back to the...
Do you think it's because we were all so lonely, just like working remotely? We missed having people around us.
Our digital friends became our friends.
Yeah.
I also, just as a sidebar, we were talking about this earlier on our group chat, is I didn't realize that Threads, I think it was DAUs, are catching up to Twitter's DAUs. It is an echo chamber where Twitter is. It is a highly concentrated of VCs, investors, and maybe that negates the point I was trying to make earlier that like the customers aren't on Twitter. They're all around the world. And so it is a specific audience that you're performing for.
Totally. I remember the day after the election, the presidential election, all these folks got on Twitter and they're like, see, Twitter is real life. And I'm like, no. But
Twitter is the life you would like to create in your own mind.
Yeah. I mean, it's Twitter is, I think even going back to the America's Party, right? Elon Musk's new party,
Great branding, by the way.
Incredible branding, but if you were to look at my feed, you would think that it is like a legit third party with legs and like a real contender in 2028. And I think, we learned
Instead,
this
it's just
lesson.
been tweeted, nothing more.
But he is starting this party with one of the most powerful media platforms. So we can't dismiss that for sure.
I do also think like Twitter is both not real life, but then also, I guess I'll argue against that on one dimension, which is I think perception can drive reality. Every channel has sort of its own sort of tone and vibes. And like I think people are also self-selecting into the ones that feel most comfortable for them and the most validating. And that both makes sense, like human nature, but it's also like, I think can be a little bit dangerous.
Okay. So I guess maybe one takeaway is that it's like, one thing I heard you say was play the games you know how to win. We still, like, jury's still out. Like, this is interesting in the beginning to like sort of spark the fire and get it going, but you don't know what happens in the long term. You really have to build something that delivers real value, that build something people want. And then that these are echo chambers and, everything is performance art. We do just want to be entertained, but I think that that's still not the vast majority of what's happening. Let's move over to Q&A.
Okay, I'm graduating from a master's program and deciding between San Francisco and New York. And if I'm honest, one of the factors is dating. Which city would you recommend for a woman in her late 20s?
Did we all do our late 20s in San Francisco? Is that accurate?
Yes, I've been here.
Mine was New York City.
Oh, okay, good. Okay. So
You want to take a
I
shot?
never dated in New York, so I can't
Yeah,
speak
same.
to that firsthand.
No, it's
Sally.
So I went to both undergrad and grad school in New York. So I had a very concentrated friend base that were in journalism, which was my undergrad, and then business school, which was my grad. And so I don't know. I'm going to ask you guys the question because I don't know. I'm the only single one here.
I had a blast dating in my 20s in San Francisco, but I think I've always liked nerdier guys, so it was great. So to this listener, if you like nerdy guys, there's like good ratios in San Francisco. This is where I'm really
Right,
gonna
but
date
there's
myself.
the whole the odds are good, but the goods are odd, right?
That
Yes. This is where I'm really gonna date myself. But I was like dating pre-mobile dating apps where you can swipe. Like I was dating when it was OkCupid.
Match.com on the URL.
And I loved it because it was so much more like writing intensive. You had your like clever bio, you like messaged a bunch back and forth, which definitely played more to my strengths.
Okay, well, we'll do a whole episode on this one, but yeah.
Maybe one preview that a friend of mine told me was in their 20s, their dating pool was bigger when they worked at bigger companies. Like, let's say.
Yes. Okay. So that's where I was going to go. And it's like, if this person is working in tech, right? A lot of big tech companies, their headquarters are in San Francisco or in the Bay Area. You can live in San Francisco and commute down to the South Bay or whatever. And I think that one thing that we take for granted, coming out of high school or college or grad school, when these dating pools are they're just there for you. Right. Yeah. And working at a Facebook, especially, when I left Facebook, it was, 10 times bigger than when I joined. It's it seemed like a really great place. So there were a lot of people who ended up getting married, who met at work. And so whenever I have single friends in the Bay Area and I find that they're working at a 4-person startup and they talk to 2 people a day outside of that, I'm like, you might just want to go work at a giant company because your pool becomes larger. And so if this person works in tech, I think there are just more opportunities here to maybe just do that run-in.
I remember at Google, everyone dated each other. In the earlier days, it was encouraged because they wanted people to spend as much time on campus. I mean, they were trying to make it feel like a college campus.
So it
sounds like we're saying, move to San Francisco, go work at LinkedIn. Yes.
OpenAI. I don't know. I feel
OpenAI. That's right.
Totally.
Okay.
I wonder what the dating scene is like there. Maybe we'll have someone write in and tell us.
Perfect.
Thank you for listening to Great Chat. Have questions for us? Make sure to submit them at anothergreatchat.com. See you next week.
Thank you.